It is 2002. 3 years have passed since the release of System Shock 2, one of the greatest immersive sims ever made. 2 years have passed since the release of Thief 2, another one of the greatest immersive sims ever made. It had been 2 years since Looking Glass, the progenitor of both of those franchises, was shuttered. It had also been 2 years since Deus Ex supercharged the immersive sim to a whole new level. It had been 1 year since some really creative German people made Gothic. It was only a few months since Bethesda released what can be considered a sort of an immersive sim, Morrowind, and it'll be another year before disappointment would grip fans of Deus Ex. But it was here and now in June of 2002 when Joe would release a game created by a company that no one had heard of before, a company that was barely 2 years old, a company called Arcane Studios, one founded by a bunch of people that really liked Looking Glass games, not the flight sims or the other things, but the immersive sims, the games that would put you in the shoes of a character and let you explore that world in a way that you would as an actual person, with all the physicality and ability to interact with the environment, with the people living in that world that you would have were this to be real life. Of course, with the limitations of the technology and the resources that they had on hand. Arcane Studios wanted to create not its own franchise. It wanted to continue what Looking Glass started. It wanted to make Ultima Underworld 3. But since Electronic Arts did not actually want more Ultima on the market right now, since its own plans for Ultima 10 had gone up in smoke and Ultima Online 2 was also cancelled, Origin Systems itself being on the chopping block in a few years, this was not to be Ultima Underworld 3. There would be no new quest of the Avatar in the deep, dark abyss. But Arcane still wanted to make Ultima Underworld, and they did. They just called it something different. They called it Arx Fatalis. In every aspect that mattered and wasn't related to the story or the characters, this was Ultima Underworld 3. It was built upon the same principles that the Looking Glass, or should I say Blue Sky, made Ultima Underworld a decade earlier. This was not a dungeon crawler. You were not expected to go into the dungeon and just kill everything you saw. Now sure, you could do that. It was an option because you were in a world where you had complete agency over your own actions. Were you to decide that no other life form should survive your adventure, the game adapted and did its best to actually continue. Though playing it like that meant you weren't really playing Arx Fatalis, you were just playing a dungeon crawler where you are needlessly cruel. The main difference between a dungeon sim and a dungeon crawler is that the dungeon itself is not the enemy. The dungeon is just a place, it is a world, it is a society, one in which you must exist or coexist with all the other people in there. In Ultima Underworld you would have outcasts, you would have mages, you would have goblins, you would have trolls, you would have lizard people whose language you had to learn in order to interact with them. In Ultima Underworld 2, you had an entire castle that was encased in blackstone, and then many worlds beyond it. Some hostile, many not. And in Arx Fatalis, you had the remains of what used to be a surface-dwelling society, one that was pushed into the old dwarven mines when the sun began to fade and the cold drew ever closer. Conflicts suddenly stopped, and humans and dwarves and snake ladies and trolls and goblins and ratmen, maybe not the ratmen, worked together to move all they could save deep beneath the earth, where they could still survive, where they could still lie in hope that one day the sun would return. Naturally, some people did not believe that the sun would ever return on its own and tried their best to find ways around the problem. Ways that involved invoking a god of death and destruction from another realm. A god that promised them to reignite the sun, even though it meant murdering pretty much everybody to do it. Akba is coming, and somebody has to stop him. And that somebody could be you. Or you could be just some maniac that kills everybody here for no reason. When I first played Arx Fatalis, I had a Pentium 2. The game did not really get along with the Pentium 2. Loading a single level would take sometimes 15 minutes, sometimes half an hour, so just changing from one area to the other was something that I dreaded. It also meant that I couldn't actually finish the game on my first attempt, since loading took way too long and it didn't run as well as it could have. It took many years before I could actually finish it, but in those years it just stayed in my mind, because without a doubt, Arx Fatalis makes one of the best first impressions I've seen in a game of this type, and it does so primarily through its physicality. Everything in the game that isn't bolted down you can pick up and throw or put in your inventory. Now this is not something new. A lot of games had done this in the previous years, though most of them were 2D and most of them were Ultima games. But now you were in 3D. Now you could hurl a stone at somebody's face. Now you could pick up somebody's severed head and just play with it if you were weird like that. But most of all, I appreciated that it incorporated that physicality into actual gameplay elements that had before been just abstractions. Now, sure, your inventory was still sort of abstract. It was presumed that you were carrying a lot of things on your belt or something and then could get 2 backpacks. There were 3 in the game, but logically you could only carry 2. But the way it handled magic was just superb at the time. And it was sort of a product of its time, because not long before it, Black and White was released, and Black and White had a really interesting way of handling spells. You would draw a glyph on the screen with your hand, with the mouse, and that would translate into a spell. Arx was built upon the concepts of Ultima Underworld and its rune system, but instead of combining the runes by touching them or putting them in a bag with reagents or something, you would draw the runes in the air with your hand, with your mouse. You would often not succeed. The spell system in Arx was not made to allow you to quickly cast 50 fireballs in the middle of combat. You could quick save, you could prepare up to 3 spells, and then launch them in quick succession if you had the mana. But this wasn't what you would call a panic-friendly spell system, and that just made it believable. How? In a world that has magic, have mages not just taken over? It's quite simple. Unless they have a spell prepared, they're gonna fiddle with their hands in the air as somebody's cutting off their arms. That, and there was a thing called the Magi Wars that was won because of 2 artifacts that make magic kind of not all that usable, or at least energy draining, which I assume was the main weapon used in the wars. I mean, if you could drain your enemy's mana and you were a mage as well, you could cast infinite spells and they couldn't do anything. Well, they could stab you. I'm not sure how that would ended just by having a lot of mages be stabbed quickly before they could fiddle around with spells. Probably because mages, dedicated mages, maybe could quick slot more than 3 spells and could do more than what an amnesiac can in the couple of days they spend in this world. This show is gonna contain some spoilers about Arx Fatalis, but that's okay. It doesn't have a story that's that deep. It's kinda simple in its way, but it's not a bad kind of simple. What I'm saying is that the main draw of the game, the main focus of it, was in the immersive experience, and as I've said, it nails that completely in the first second, because when you look down, you have feet. You can see them move. You can't dance or anything like that, but you have a physical presence in the world. Now sure, it does use the age-old cliche of amnesia, but it uses it for a reason, so that you, as the player, can understand this world at your own pace without the character's knowledge hampering that effort. It's up to you, the player, to find out things like the Queen of Arx being assassinated by somebody that's still in Arx, hiding somewhere. It's up to you to solve that murder if you want to. It's up to you to figure out how to rob a bank if you want to. Though why would somebody like you want to rob a bank is a bit dubious. Arx Fatalis gave you total freedom to do whatever you wanted to. You wanted to go rob a bank, you had to plan a bit before and find some things, but you could do that. Do you want to bake stuff? Have at it. Get some flour, get some water, get a rolling pin, or not. You want to make bread? You want to make a pie? You want to make a pizza? Actually, I'm not sure if you can make a pizza, but you can make apple pies. You just throw them next to a fire and see them cook, see them bake, see them grow. You had the freedom to try, and the game would often reward your curiosity. If you used fire on ice, it would melt. If you used a douse spell in a room full of candles, they all go out. If you poison someone's food, well, they would probably notice because poison is quite green and easily visible. And if you ate a lot of garlic, well, people would not like it and would run away from you. Now, these are things that you, as the player, find out at the same rhythm as your character does. Because if your character knew who they were from the start, the game could not happen. As it does, you would just have the main plot. And that is that you're not a person, you're not a human, you are some sort of astral space Texas Ranger, and you're sent to this world with one purpose. Touch a meteor, it'll blow up, you go home. And when that fails, you have to kill a god. Now you may be wondering, why did the Node and the interdimensional police force send you as an amnesiac? Well, it didn't. It's just that amnesia sometimes happens. But why did it send you as a level 1 poor bastard that gets hit in the head by a goblin and then thrown in jail to be sold off as a sacrifice to Akba? Actually, now that I think about it, to get sacrificed to Akba, they had to put you under the meteorite and kill you there, so you were sent exactly where you had to be. If the guy in the next cell to you didn't try to escape and get you to go with him, you would have ended up exactly where you needed to be, and could have just touched the meteorite then and mission complete. Well, no, actually not mission complete, because as it turns out, the meteorite was booby-trapped. But as to why the Nodin did not give you any special powers, to fight a god, it's because they used to do that. You actually find books in the... Oh, you find books, by the way. It's one of those games where you find books that you can read, and notes that you can read that aren't detailed journals about what everybody had for lunch one day just because System Shock did it. And then every other game needed to have audio logs for some reason until the end of time for no logical sense. Why were those vinyls in trash bags and waste containers in BioShock Infinite? Back to the matter at hand. You find out through the course of the game that the Nodin used to send really powerful guardians, you being a guardian, to deal with delinquent gods, which sort of cause problems in those worlds. You, as a guardian, were really powerful. Even stripped of your supernatural abilities, you could achieve in a short time what it took people all their lives to achieve. And giving to someone like that the power to kill a god from the get-go would make you a threat to that entire realm. Like, if you sneezed, things may not end well for people. And even if you didn't, basically you were a god. For the people in that realm, you were a god, and they would start to worship you, which is something that the Nodin did not want. So, the directive. Guardians don't get special powers, they just get one very specific ability that will help them achieve their mission. In your case, It's blowing up a meteor when you touch it. A meteor that is booby-trapped so it doesn't work. But even when you do remember who you are and why you're there, the game still lets you do whatever you want to. And what could you do? Well, that depends mostly on what kind of character you decided to build. You have 3 paths, if you will, though they're not set in stone, they're not defined. You have a set of skills, a set of attributes, and it's up to you to decide how to invest in them. If you're gonna play Arx, I'm just gonna say it right now, lockpick is pointless. The technical skill, which will let you disarm traps and open locks, is useless. Even if you max it out, which I'm not sure at what point it maxes out, I had over 100 last time I played it, you'll find it to be useless. If a door is meant to be open, it will have a key. If a chest is meant to be open, it will have a key. Those that don't are really not worth the investment. You're better off putting those points into something like magic, so you don't have to betray somebody at the end because you have to enchant a sword with the egg of a dragon. An egg, by the way, that you could also use to cure some guy who turned himself into a were-chicken. That kept bugging me when I first played it. In the crypt, there's a guy who turned himself into a chicken. I'm not kidding, he turned himself into a chicken, Morty. A chicken. And there was no way to cure him in the initial version of the game. But that got patched in later, so you have to get more dragon eggs. And to do that, you kind of have to do something bad to a dragon, which is not something you want to do to a dragon, because in this world they speak and are sentient and intelligent, and make it quite clear that they value their own young more than they value humanity, so tread carefully. Primarily, if you want to play the game and win with very little effort, you're gonna need a spell. One single spell. A spell that, much like most of Arx, is not told to you, is not revealed at any point through some scroll, through some book, or through some dialogue. You see it being cast by a lich at one point. And that spell is Life Drain. You cast it using 2 runes, life and movement. It is a spell that basically makes a field of death around you that heals you and kills everybody else. It is the easy button of the game, which is not something terrible to have, since the later enemies, the Ilcids, will murderize you 5 ways from Sunday before you can even begin to cast it. Now, were you not to run into that lich and remember exactly what runes he used to murderize you in the first place, you may be wondering, well, how do I learn that spell? How do I know it? Well, you go to a place that's secluded and then just start fiddling with magic. Arx is a game of secrets. Most of the game is secrets. It is a game that expects you to explore every nook and cranny, because you never know when you're gonna find something that's actually bigger than you thought it could be. What to you may be a simple enemy may actually be the start of a quest that you never knew you could get, with a reward that may actually be amazing. And what really works for Arx Fatalis that I would say may not work for something like Morrowind or Skyrim, or to a lesser extent Gothic, is that the world is finite. Arx Fatalis is a tiny game when it comes to the actual size of where you play. I would say it is about at the same level as Ultima Underworld 1, though my mind may be playing tricks on me in terms of the scale of things. It is, however, smaller, I would say, than Ultima Underworld 2, which had at least a lot more variety in the things you could explore. Therefore, you have to pay attention to all the little things, because they're not put there haphazardly. The game is designed to entice you. Characters will speak just within earshot of you because they can't really speak otherwise. You are in a cave with them. You will hear them from the other end of a corridor. You'll see people walk around that you may want to follow. People that, well, they actually go places. They don't necessarily just teleport to where they should be, they have to get there. And that sticks with you in your mind. Because when you're attacked by something, for example, a rat man, when you're coming out of a tavern, you have to think that it comes from somewhere. The game induces that idea into your head. Now, sure, there is a lot of teleporting going around when it comes to events, but outside of special incidents or special cutscenes or quests, you are witness to a world that is, to a degree, simulated. It's not as in-depth as Gothic, I would say. You don't have as many characters running around, but they all have things to do. They have a schedule they keep to, and even though there's no sun, they do go to bed. And you're gonna have to wait until the blacksmith goes back to work to fix your stuff. That is, if you didn't pick any blacksmithing skills. Now, you yourself cannot sleep. That, on the one hand, adds to the urgency of the quest, and also kind of makes it annoying that you can't really sell the stuff you've acquired from a visit to the goblins because the shopkeeper is at home, sleeping, or asking you to get out of his home. But hey, while you're waiting, you could always go to the tavern and get drunk, because you can do that in the game. Maybe you lose some money gambling, or try to open that mysterious door that's there for some reason. And why does Daisy, the barkeep, keep saying something about only the initiated get to go through that door? The tavern, by the way, the Yellow Tulip, and Daisy would go on to make a cameo in the Prey game that Arkane made a few years ago. She was a robot in that version. Also, I don't think she was evil. It's actually not evident that she is, because she doesn't do anything outright evil, but it does give you the idea that there may have been more there. And you get that sense the moment you start to do things that aren't related to the main quest. The game expects you to do them, or at least the game lets you do them. As I've mentioned, you have the option to rob a bank. You, as a guardian of the node, have no reason to do that, but it's something cool that the player would want to. Also, there's a door leading to the outside that you can open if you kill the king, or at least get the key from his room. The moment you open it, you die freezing to death, because it is very, very cold outside. The game, well, doesn't necessarily expect you to do that, but there's a lot of fun you can have by doing things just because you think that maybe you could, not because you as a guardian of the node and the character that you're playing would do. You could, for example, go to explore the crypt, which is a multi-level spanning dungeon that's, well, it's the dungeon crawl component of the game. It's full of undead that will rise up if you don't stick them through the heart. It's full of traps, it's full of levers, it's full of all sorts of things and treasure and puzzles galore. And then there you're gonna find quests. Or at least one quest, or maybe two quests. It depends on your perspective. But they're not great quests. I mean, they're interesting. But you get the sense that that's not how they were supposed to finalize, because you really have no way of triggering them, of talking to other characters about them. You have actually very, very limited dialogue. Everything is automatic. Everything is precise. Everybody has one or two lines and that's it. It is so much more limited in terms of interaction, of conversational interaction with other characters, than Ultima Underworld was. Oh, Ultima Underworld let you talk to people, insult them, get them to attack you just by insulting them. There is no such depth to the dialogue here, and there isn't to the way that the side quests are made. They just happen when you get to certain points. One of the main overarching storylines of the game, the side plots, is what happened to the old queen. Where is her daughter? That is resolved basically when you go to fight the final boss through a cutscene that detours you back to the beginning of the level so that a cutscene can take place. A cutscene whose ending you influenced by what you have done throughout the game. And it's important to specify that it is what you have done, not what you have said, because you can't really say anything other than what your character will always say. There are no options. But your actions, those have consequences. You can betray someone, or you can take off all your clothes and cast Bless on yourself and enchant your own damn sword. That's because plate armor decreases your magic aptitude and you need a lot of it to cast enchant. You don't have to get naked if you're good at magic. Also, by the way, object knowledge lets you make potions. Get a lot of that one. You're gonna need them. And because of the nature of the game, you can absolutely fail quests and not unintentionally. You can just, well, kill people. At one point you have to convince some trolls to help you clear some rubble. Now, the intended way was to help the trolls by finding out who stole their idol, but you could also kill them all and then use the queue find to let out a troll that's being locked up who will clear the rubble for you. The game has ways of compensating for the fact that you at any time can kill everybody, but that is kind of sadly where the reactivity of the story stops, where your choices stop. You can either do things directly or backstab most of the people you meet, all of them actually. You kind of feel that there could have been an extra layer there, an extra component. That is probably because it came out after Gothic, and Gothic gave you a lot more options. You had a lot more versatility in the social aspect and the choice aspect because of its multi-factional component. And while there are many factions in Arx, you're never really part of any of them apart from the human faction, because you talk with them, you strategize with them to stop Akba. Now sure, you can help the trolls gain their independence, which will result in you killing all the goblins. That's okay, they were helping the death god anyway, so nobody's gonna miss them. But there's not much more there. The deeper you go into Arx Fatalis, the shallower it becomes, to the point where the last level, where the dwarves are, where you would expect to find a society of, well, technically in Ultima Underworld, if you call them dwarves, they would get upset, so they wanted to be called mountain folk. But when you get there, they're all dead. They dug so deep that they found a beast that's unkillable by weapons, and that killed them. And then you have to find a way to kill it. The final level of the dungeon, of the catacombs of the game, if you will, I mean the deepest one where you can go, is essentially a homage to Resident Evil 2 or 3, or maybe a prototype for that level of Dead Space where you run from a creature that you can't kill, or hey, Metroid Fusion. It is an absolutely tense experience that is made all the more horrific by the fact that in the Dwarven mines you cannot use magic. It's warded against it, so you have to use your wits and the only available way in gameplay terms of killing the creature to kill the creature. Otherwise it basically one-shots you. But that's where the societal aspect of the game ends. Well, actually it ended a couple of levels earlier, because once you get below the goblins and the trolls in their mine, I mean where there's two clans, the earth goblins and the water goblins that hate each other, once you get below that, well, there's the snake ladies too, but once you get below those, there's no more societal aspect. It becomes just a dungeon crawler. There's no more interaction, which is kind of a shame, because what little society there is there, you can explore. You can find conspiracies that are really interesting, that just kind of make you wonder how many secrets are there in this world, in this small confined space that doesn't seem to have enough people to, you know, have a functional society. And there's like one child there. That's it. How are they going to survive when everybody seems to be a soldier? Where is everybody else? Well, everybody else is an abstraction, because at that point in time, I don't think they had the resources, both financially and technologically, and of course they didn't have enough time to make something that would be an accurate representation of what an underground society would be. I mean, Gothic took about 4 years to make. That is why it is much bigger. You can actually get a feel for that being a working society. A dysfunctional one, but a working one. Whereas in Arx, you kind of don't get that the more you play it, because there just aren't enough people there. However, it is a game that is absolutely, totally, amazingly realistic. Sure, maybe not in its graphics. The graphics were amazing back then. In a lot of places it looks better than Morrowind did, especially in the fact that people can sit down. But the realism of it comes in the sound design and in the world design. There's barely any music in the game. What you will find, however, is the constant howling of the wind, of the air current. Now, why would there be an air current in a mine that's 8 levels deep? Well, how would people breathe down there? They would suffocate really quickly unless they had built ventilation shafts, and you will find these everywhere. It's the source of the noise, of the sound of the wind, and the closer you get to them, the more powerful it gets, to the point where you feel it. You, standing in front of your monitor, you feel it. And that is part of the world design. A world that does something that I have not seen pretty much any other RPG world do properly, I mean. It has a sewer system. I'm not talking about a sewer level. Oh, every RPG has it, but no. This game has toilets. They're everywhere because they would need to be everywhere for this to not be a stinking pile of poo where people throw waste out the window and then slip in it and fall down and then get dysentery or something. Cholera, probably. The fact that this game has toilets that at predefined events characters use makes it simply amazing. And finding all those little secrets, all those small items squirreled away somewhere on a ledge, trying to figure out how to rob a bank, which, again, you can't lockpick it. You're gonna have to build a key. Lockpicking is pointless. Or trying to find all the extra hidden passages in the castle that seem to be there just in case. Or maybe as part of some deep conspiracy. All those are superb. They are magnificent, and the deeper you go into the game, the less of them you have. The ending of the game is just a dungeon crawl. The crypt itself is a dungeon crawl. It's not really living up to the potential it could have had as a dungeon sim. We can't even kick people. We had to wait until Dark Messiah of Might and Magic to do that. What I'm saying is the combat is it's okay. It's kind of at the same level as Ultima Underworld, but a bit faster and cheesier if you use the life drain spell, which you have no reason not to. Arx Fatalis is a game that could really benefit from a remake. Not a remaster, no. We have a remaster in the form of Arx Libertatis, which is the version you're mostly seeing on the background. It's a re-implementation of the game, lets you use modern resolutions, makes casting spells a bit easier because the mouse was kind of fiddly in the original version, played on a modern PC, but we could really use a remaster of it. Make it as grand as Arkane would have wanted to make it back then, if they had the money, the time, and the technology to do it. Bring the dwarves back, don't have them all be dead. Have more races there, have more interaction. I keep thinking to the end of the game, when you go back to the node and to the world between worlds, to a different plane, and you look down upon the frozen world of Arx and see that this wasn't the only dungeon, the only squirreled away hiding spot of humanity, of goblinanity, of trollanity, of civilization. There are many out there in the shadow of a broken planet whose dust covers the sun. I would encourage you to try and play Arx Fatalis. The first moments of it, when you're just exploring the first levels and trying to figure out how to sneak past some goblins, or robbing everybody in the city of Arx blind, or just going to the tavern for a quick drink and possibly making an anti-werewolf chicken or a were-chicken. serum, potion, antidote thing. Those moments are what make Arx great. But the deeper you go into it, the less of that there is. I just kinda wish it was more of that with the first part and less of the just go around an empty dungeon doing a puzzle. Because that's what Ultima Underworld also boiled down to, but you still had the social aspect, the dialogue, the constant need to go back to talk to people, trading with everybody. Here you just have a couple of people you trade with, that's all. And there's no dialogue. You have no options. And what little story there is there, what side story there is really Spartan and somewhat roughly implemented. The game was free a while ago on the Bethesda launcher, if anybody uses that. I don't, so even though I have the free version, I still bought it from GOG. I actually think we may still have an affiliate link for GOG, so it's probably in the comments or the description somewhere. We'll see. This was one of the last dungeon sims, if I'm not mistaken. At one point in time, Firefly Studios, developer of the Stronghold series, were working on a game called Dungeon Hero, which was kind of a dungeon sim. At least it looked at points that it may have been one, but okay, maybe it wasn't. We had Ultima Ascendant a while ago, which apparently turned out really, really badly, and I haven't played it yet, so I'm not sure. Well, you could make an argument that Dwarf Fortress is also dungeon sim, but not in the immersive sim sense. There just hasn't been one. This was the last. Arkane would go on to make plenty of other games based on the Looking Glass formula. They made Dishonored as an homage to Thief. They made Prey as an homage to System Shock. Deathloop, that's a whole different thing. I still have hopes that one day they will make Arx Fatalis 2, but that probably won't happen. Thanks for tuning in, and do yourself a favor. Go help out a French goblin chef in his kitchen. And just ask yourself, why does this goblin have a French accent when no other goblins speak like that? Is there a French goblin country somewhere in Arx? Was it destroyed by the frost? Are goblins French? Are the trolls just British people? Are the ratmen simply a metaphor for Romanians? We'll probably never know. Goodbye.